NFL draft finally here. So I can go through what y'all need to know to make some money on this bitch. And really interesting. So obviously, I talk about everything here from this channel from the NFL perspective of things. I'm not going to pretend like I did a bunch of college scouting or any of that. I know most people, frankly, even if they do, don't end up correct a lot of the time. And I'm not going to get too much into the merits of amateur college scouting. But the point of this, right, is come at it from the team's perspective. I care about what's in the NFL. Once it is in the NFL, then I can tell you, if it's good or not. And this is more about what these moves signify as far as the team's mentality going into the year, and frankly, if they're making good decisions or not. So, yeah, let's get into it. First, not going to talk about it a lot. Jags take the best quarterback, presumably in the draft. Trevor Lawrence, potentially franchise-changing move, all that shit. You've heard all that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Same thing with Zach Wilson. We'll see if he ends up being the second best prospect from everything I'm aware of. I'll go ahead and say right now, I think it's probably Justin Fields, but that's not based on a lot. Like I said, I tend to really prefer to withhold judgment, obviously, because if I would have gone into last year with a lot of preconceived notions, I would have not think the way I do of Justin Herbert, and that's what happened to I think a lot of people. So I want to hold on to a lot of that, but yeah, Jets take a quarterback, right decision for sure. Similar thing with the 49ers. I can try to, criticize whatever the ideology behind a guy who hasn't played in a year and a half or whatever, but not really going to. I just don't know enough about the differences as far as college guys to make that decision. But as far as the NFL side of it goes, for sure, should draft a quarterback. The one thing that really concerns me here, and this is what I got to talk about, is the idea that because they're drafted Trey Lance, they're committing to Jimmy Garoppolo for this year. That would be a horrible decision. That one I can promise you. Jimmy Garoppolo is very, very bad and actively limits their ceiling. Now, the 49ers have a chance to be really good this year, despite coming off, obviously they trade up to the number 3 pick. But similar to a few years ago when they end up all the way at number 2 and instantly go to the Super Bowl, 49ers have a ton of that same talent there, some really good young players, obviously a really good coach. And listen, they're a team that can make it back and or win the Super Bowl with better quarterback play. They were lucky to have it go the way it did. They had a lot of things come together a couple of years ago that are hard to replicate. What can make up for those things, again, is being a lot better at the one position that matters, really. So, you're not getting that Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm going to go through that through the season. If he's their starting quarterback, they're going to be a real easy team to bet against. But that's the one thing that concerns me. Now, I'm going to guess they're smart enough that by at least week 2 or 3, they're going to realize that it's just a horrible decision, but not something I can promise. So if anything, that's definitely a concern with this one. Atlanta Falcons take Kyle Pitts. With this one, the one thing that concerns me, it is the whole tight end value of this thing. Now, generally, I don't much care for positional value as long as the player is good or not. There are reasons, especially ones I'm going to get to later, as far as why some positions are just naturally less valuable than others, for sure. Tight end wide receiver, though, not necessarily one of those things. Problem I have here, though, it is that the top end tight ends are just not as impactful as the top end wide receivers. Now, there's no guarantee, that Kyle Pitts is limited by the ceiling of the current tight ends in the NFL. Could he be better than George Kittle, Travis Kelce? Maybe. I'm not going to project that. But what concerns me is how much better he has to be even than them to get into like the top 5 receivers, as far as Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, Stephon Diggs. For him to be good enough from the tight end position to impact team the way that those guys can would be very surprising to me. Now, is it possible? Sure. It's hard to know. That's the one thing with this. Now, again, I have him listed partly as a wide receiver here because there's a chance that's basically what he plays anyway, and that kind of whole conversation I had there is not really a relevant point, but that is, again, something I'm concerned here is just it's rare, if impossible, to find a tight end that's as impactful as the top, 5-10 receivers in the NFL. So we'll see. Don't hate the pick, hard to. We're obviously a really, really good college player, but we'll see what happens. This next one, probably the most positive that I have to say, obviously the first 3 being chalk / quarterbacks. Ja'Marr Chase, I'm really happy with the Bengals decision here. Obviously, they had a big choice for most people between Ja'Marr Chase and Penei Sewell at this pick. That's what it ended up coming down to, and I believe pretty comfortably they made the right choice. Reason being, basically, what's going to make their team better is getting better at the top end of their wide receiver core as opposed to raising what is currently not that bad of a tackle situation. Now, are they one of the worst in the league? Yes, but it's not in the disastrous level that it has been with them starting Bobby Hart, for example. I mean, they're going to run out, Jonah Williams and Riley Reef this year, and that's, while not great or even good, isn't horrible. And what really makes a lot of these great offenses go, now there are multiple ways to do it, but a lot of the times they do kind of require a top end receiver. You saw what happened with the Bills between last year and this year, and while that was a little bit of Josh Allen's progression, I would put a gigantic majority of that on the addition of Stephon Diggs. And you might be seeing that here too. Hard to say for sure, but yeah, I'm definitely happy. I think those high-end receivers are incredibly important to winning the NFL at this point. And Devontae Adams being a good example of that as well. And Ja'Marr Chase definitely has a potential to be one of those. So definitely I think the Bengals made the right decision. Hard to make a wrong one at this point. I wouldn't hate it if they take Sewell either, but happy for them. Next, this one is one I want to naturally criticize because I do admit that I think Devontae Smith is amazing, really, really good, but that is based on, more just casually watching games as opposed to what I do with NFL players in terms of actually studying them significant amounts. So I want to withhold again that it's possible Waddle was just better. I don't know that. But as far as the receiver thing goes, definitely I think it was overall a good decision, really for a lot of the same reasons as Chase. Last pick with the Bengals, it's something that helps their potential young quarterback be a lot better. I don't think they're in a horrible position with their offensive line right now. And yeah, I'm definitely okay with this one. Next, Penei Sewell finally goes to the Lions. And yeah, at this point in the draft, if Penei Sewell's everything people say he's going to be, then shit. Obviously they're getting a huge steal. But regardless of that, if he's just a quality tackle, those guys are, despite how I've been talking about receivers, those guys are super valuable too. And he's going to instantly make them really good. Now, one thing I want to point out is the Lions already had good tackles between Taylor Decker and Tyrell Cosby, who is a player, if your team needs to trade for a tackle now, I would be calling instantly about. But this will presumably make them better. You're talking about keeping a strength of a team, a strength in terms of the Lions' offensive line, clearly the best part of their team. And if you're going to get better down the road, it's going to be the easiest way, I think, is by keeping a strength strong. Obviously, if you're trying to take every bottom of the roster position and bring it way up, it's going to take you a long time. But if you're just trying to keep something that's already up here, then go a lot easier. And that's why I like this for sure. And obviously, there could be a giant drop off at this point in the draft going to the next pick. We'll see. But definitely, as far as decision making, happy with it. These next two picks, the Panthers with J.C. Horn corner and the Broncos, Patrick Surtain. Definitely big fans of both of these. Corner, super important too. Don't have much to say about the players themselves, but these are two teams that were horrible at corner. Broncos a little bit better in terms of their stopgap guys they signed this year, but two teams that do seem to understand some of the problems they have and are trying to work them to get better. Now, I have other criticisms of especially the Panthers offseason, but these two picks, no complaints for sure. 10, love this. Like I said, of all the players in the draft that I cared about necessarily where they land, Devontae Smith was way up on that list. Now, I do got to be careful with assigning too much to that for sure, but Devontae Smith is a player who has a chance to be in that class of receiver that I keep talking about: Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Robert Woods, those type of guys who are very extremely valuable in the NFL, and he has a chance to be one of those for sure. I like this for the Eagles. They obviously need receivers. Yeah, no complaints. Wow. Bears trading up for Justin Fields. I would argue this is probably my favorite draft pick in the whole thing, pretty clearly. Now, partly that is because I do have a little bit of bias towards thinking Justin Fields pretty good. I'll admit that. But Bears trade up, didn't give up an insane amount, and get a quarterback who in most classes you're talking about is top 3 pick. That's pretty good. Now, can I guarantee, Fields is going to work out? No, I'm not going to sit here and do that. But this is the type of player, especially considering where the Bears is a franchise, I don't think you can take a better shot than this. I don't imagine. I can't imagine how you would do it. So I love this. Is it necessarily going to work out? We'll see. He is going to be a rookie quarterback next year on a team that's aging and getting worse. But yeah, you got to fix quarterback before you really do anything else, and they definitely took about as good of a shot as you can at doing it here. So I love that. This is another one I like a lot. I don't have really an opinion of Micah Parsons himself, but the Cowboys are identifying what the problem was I talked about this going into the draft, that really their issue is they put a lot on linebackers, a lot of emphasis on linebackers making plays, and then they have linebackers who don't make plays at all. Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch both have some quality characteristics, but overall, as leaders of your defense, you get, what you got with the Cowboys last year. So this could help that a lot. Now, again, rookie player. Is he going to be amazing right away? I have no idea. But I do like that they identified that that's why they struggled so much, as opposed to a lot of people who thought it was their secondary, which was bad too, don't get me wrong. But yeah, this pick go a long way, making their defense get a lot better, a lot quicker. Not one needs to talk about, obviously, too much. Chargers drafting a tackle, clearly needed one. Don't have an opinion on the player himself, but definitely that's the right process here. This next one, this one's weird. I don't really get the Jets' imperative to trade up for a guard. We've seen players in this range, offensive linemen, kind of not end up being great, to be honest. I mean, you have Garrett Bradbury with the Vikings a couple of years ago, a guy like James Daniels on the Bears. These later on, now I just gave credit to the Chargers for taking one. A, tackle's a little bit different, and B, they didn't trade up for him. This just seems a little unnecessary and weird. Now, maybe they really like him. Maybe he's really good, sure. But trading up in the first round to draft a guard / tackle, maybe they can keep him. Well, I can't imagine the Jets do, but it is a little questionable to me, for sure. For sure. Maybe it works out, obviously, but we'll see. This one, you see, one of my favorite, pretty much my number one favorite fun fact, that is actually Mac Jones' middle name, which I think is absolutely hilarious. But as far as the actual pick, Mac Jones, I love that. I think there was a lot of credence to what the draft analysts previous to this were going into and talking about positively with him. Now, that's something I'll see for myself, obviously, once he starts playing. But you're talking about a team who has a chance to be really good really quickly with a really good coach who's drafting a player who actually has a ceiling as a quarterback. Now, people might disagree with that in terms of what ceiling actually means. I will fight back 100%. Ceiling is not about physical traits, really. That can contribute to it, but it's literally just how good can this player be? And you can be good a million different ways. Tom Brady obviously has a ceiling, the greatest of all time. Now, do I think Mac Jones is Tom Brady? No, that's not the point of that. The point is that there's different ways to be good. Just because you don't run a 4.3 does not really mean anything about your ceiling. So yeah, Mac Jones clearly has a ceiling to be really good. You saw that in the Alabama offense last year. Is it going to happen? I have no idea, but I really like this for the Patriots. This next one, I like this too. Zaven Collins, we'll see about the value of that, but this is now what this allows the Cardinals to do. Well, it allows them to not depend on Isaiah Simmons to be good next year, because frankly, Isaiah Simmons didn't show he could be all that good. Now, or could is maybe not the right word there. He did put together a couple strings, a couple of plays of quality-ish, but what it allows you to do is not depend on him taking a step into this 3-down monster that, as their defense was constructed, they kind of were depending on him. Jordan Hank's getting older, pretty good still, but I think they're going to find smart ways to use them in Collins. I like this a lot. The one thing is, of course, with them not taking a corner, you're still maybe talking about at this point with the way other teams attacked positions in need in this draft, the single worst position group in the NFL maybe. So that's an issue for sure. But they have time still. Second rounder, frankly, just a good chance to work out as a first. But overall, I don't hate this. Next, Raiders, Alex Leatherwood. Sure, offensive linemen are always valuable. Raiders obviously needed them given their offseason moves. I don't like the previous ones in terms of, especially Trent Brown trade. What are you doing? But yeah, don't have a ton of thoughts until I see whether he's good or not. But definitely fine with it. This one, I like this for the Dolphins, Jalen Phillips. They are missing edge rushers after, again, every time I get a chance to talk about how stupid trading Shaq Lawson for Bernard Keating was, I will. That was a horrible, horrible garbage trade. But this at least works towards potentially remedying that in terms of adding an edge guy who they really need at this point, especially guys who can win one-on-one. Now, they're going to do it regardless of who their personnel is. They're going to do a really good job generating pressure. I don't worry about that. But you don't need to do that to yourself. That's the whole point of playing good a defense, is not having to do that so constantly. And even when you do that, if you have guys who can actually win, that just doubles the threat of what you're doing a lot of times. So I like this a lot. Is he going to work out? Who knows? Are there other positions, especially offensive line, that the Dolphins can look at? Yes, but they have a lot more picks coming up. And frankly, there still seem to be good players left to those positions. So I like this, no problem. Washington football team, again, another one. There's just a lot of run of picks right in this late 20 range. I think teams were really smart about what they did. Now, this one, some people I know are going to have criticisms about the specific player in terms of Owusu-Koramoah, the Notre Dame guy. versus Jamin Davis. But that's one of those ones specifically, like what I was talking about earlier, where I'm going to withhold judgment on the players themselves because I can't tell you for sure if one of those guys is better than the other one. And frankly, nobody can because you see how wrong, again, draft analysts going into this stuff are. But what you are adding, presumably, is a coverage linebacker. That is huge for this team. Huge, huge, huge. This is the one thing I think the Redskins, the football team, could have added this offseason to keep their defense close to the level that they had it at last year. So huge fan of this. Is he going to be that guy? Is actually be good? I have no idea yet. But in terms of theory and process, big fan. Another one, Giants, Kadarius Toney. Yeah, hell yeah, dude. Having a lot of receivers is just really good. It never doesn't help to have a lot of good receivers. And frankly, the Giants, too, are a team that needed some receiver help. Now, people are going to point to their top three who are varying levels of good, but they're missing high-end talent. And some of that is on way too big of a contract or going to leave probably pretty soon. Darius Slayton, best receiver on the team, pretty clearly, who's good, but he's not, a lead. Kenny Galladay got super overpaid, and while he's going to be useful in the offense, is not a guy you can really lean on to drive your offense. And Sterling Shepard, is just a above average slot outside receiver. Maybe he's a little bit better than that. Point is, they're not like so stacked at that position. They cannot, justify. And if they really like this player, I have no problem with it. Especially Kadarius Toney, again, seems like the type of receiver who could be really impactful in the NFL. And yes, there are other positions the Giants need for sure, especially edge sticking out. But it's not like none of the edges here, according to most people, are like some great prospects. So I don't mind this at all. You're adding a player who plays a position that's really important. Next, Colts. Again, not much to talk about because I don't really have an opinion on what he pay himself, but they desperately need, Jesus Christ. I talked about worst position groups earlier. The Colts and their edge rushers, they literally had one player in Al-Qadim Muhammad. So this helps. Is he going to be good? I don't know, but clearly they recognize that and they added to it, which I'm a big fan of. This one, the Tennessee Titans, Caleb Farley. We'll see. He has so much injury stuff. Again, I don't like projecting that type of thing, but they could use help at corner for sure. I'm never going to knock drafting a corner in the first round, probably. But really, they're in the same group of teams, just like the Colts in this last pick, who just happened to go the opposite way, where they really needed corners and edge rushers, and they chose this. Is that going to work out? We'll see. But yeah, nothing necessarily wrong with it. This pick, maybe one of my favorites in the whole draft, after some ones I talked about earlier. Vikings. As a team that I'm telling you, if they stay healthy, is going to be an elite team this next year. I have no problem stating that. And this just adds to that. Trading down, letting these guys draft, offensive linemen of, same range at the very least of skill, if not worse, and still taking a tackle who a lot of people think can start day one and fits in their system is, really good. Now, can I get, again, can't guarantee he's going to be good? No, but the process of this is 10 out of 10. So, yeah, love this for the Vikings. Is it going to work out necessarily? Depends if he's good or not, but huge fan of this for sure. This one, early these next two, not so much. So, if you're not, listen, running back value, very clearly a thing. And the problem with it, right, and this pick, I will say, this Najee Harris pick, I do like pretty notably more than the next one, is that running backs just clearly don't matter outside of like 2 or 3 in the NFL. And even those guys, compared to other high-end skill position players, are just not there. You're talking about Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and maybe Nick Chubb as players who are obviously worth a first-rounder at this point in the NFL. If they stay fully healthy, which is its own problem in of itself, obviously. But you're fighting with the likelihood of a player even being that good, and then the injury thing, and then the whole, 4 years of use as opposed to 7 to 8 of a different first-round pick that hits. So that's my huge problem with this. This specifically, Najee Harris, I could see him being pretty good. The Steelers do have, of all the systems, have one of the ones that leans more heavily on the running back's ability than, say, something like the 49ers does, but that doesn't make it good. They clearly have holes in the offensive line that they should have been looking at. On defense, frankly, they're not as elite as they could be. And, yeah, I don't like this. I don't completely hate it, but whatever. This is the one that I really hate. I'm going to go in on this fucking pick. I mean, what are they doing? Right? What are they doing? Jesus Christ. So, look at this from any way. This is just a giant garbage can of a pick, right? Because so even if you say, well, hey, running backs are valuable, right? Which, I disagree with generally, but I mentioned examples earlier of guys who are really, really good. Then what are you getting, right? You're getting a hopefully top level playmaker at the end of the first round for only 4 years. That sounds nice for sure. And obviously it's better than having nothing, but the likelihood of any given player drafted in the first round, later or not, of hitting that top end, because, you could still get whatever first round, running back who's just in the middle. That's not that, like a Miles Sanders who's in the second round, but, he's early second round as opposed to the late first round, whatever. Something like that, where then you're just, you're already killing the value by just not having that good of a player, something like that. Joe Mixon, another one. But even if he does hit that, then you're talking about 4 years, very little chance at a useful second contract for a player who barely makes a difference, right? And then obviously, if running backs have no value, the way I pretty much feel, then this is on its face just a complete waste. And as far as if you're saying, well, team needs Jags of all the positions, James Robinson showed he could clearly be a above average starting caliber NFL running back last year, very clearly. And they still have a million other needs that are, even though a little bit better than they were, and I think the Jags roster as a whole is better than I think maybe people think it is. It's not good, and you can afford to get better. That's how good teams are created, is by getting better and keeping, turning average places on the roster into strengths. And the Jags just gave up a chance to do that for nothing, basically. I hate this pick, even if Travis Etienne is good, which he frankly probably will be the way their offense is looking. He'll be decent. The likelihood of him being meaningful as compared to any of the next, 40 picks is not high. So this is really bad. Really horrible. Jesus Christ. What are they doing? Anyway, moving on from that to some much better picks here. God. Browns draft a corner, Greg Newsome. I like this a lot. This defense, frankly, actually has a chance to be pretty good next year, like pretty good. And one of the spots was just a corner, and this is taking another shot at starter. Is he going to end up starting? Is it going to be Greedy Williams? Who knows? But what this does is it gives you more chances, more bites at the apple in terms of getting someone who can play on the outside, and that's what you need. I love this for them for sure. He fits in their scheme, all that type of stuff. I like this a lot. This next one, too. Now, this is one that really depends on if people are kind of right in their idea of a player. Because most people seem to think that Rashad Bateman fits this, over-the-middle, intermediate route killer type mold. And if he does, then this pick is awesome. I talked about earlier, I don't much care about the distinction positions as long as it's more about what you're providing from there. And that is what the Ravens offense, specifically Lamar Jackson, absolutely lives on. People have talked about that point before. I'm not the first one to say that, but that's what this pick is about. If Rashad Bateman is actually good at that type of thing, this pick is great. Like, awesome. They needed more weapons for sure. This helps a ton. If he's not, this is not good. And, we'll see, because they already obviously just drafted their first-round receiver, Marquise Brown, who they missed on just a couple of years ago. And I'm not going to guarantee Bateman's, better than that. So we'll see. I don't mind the process. I think there were more important things that they could have targeted. But this roster is still really good, so I don't hate it at all. This one, not much to say. Saints roster at this point is really struggling. They have a lot of holes that are either holes now or about to be, and Edge is definitely one of them. That's why I don't mind this pick at all. Could they have traded up for a quarterback? I would argue they shouldn't have, because they're going to have a real good chance to pick one in the next couple of years. But, we'll see how it goes. I don't mind this pick at all. Not much to say about it. Eric Stokes, the Green Bay Packers, whatever. I don't think corners is as big a need as Packers fans say. They all hate Kevin King, which I understand, because obviously in the NFC Championship game, he kind of single-handedly with the end of the halftime thing put them in a big hole, but he was not that bad. He's bad, but he's not that bad. Like, there are worse starting corners in the NFL. The thing with this is, rookie corners, not always good or even very frequently good. And the idea that he's going to come in, replace Kevin King immediately and be better, I would have my doubts about. And what you can get production from at this point, pretty clearly, NFL is rookie receivers. And yes, I'm very much in that camp with the Packers that they need receiving help to, not because they're not going to be fine without it. They are. It's just they can be elite with it, and they're still missing that. So, yeah, whatever. If he ends up being good, it's a good pick, but we'll see about that. Bills, yeah, taking a shot in edge rusher. They need pass rushing help a lot. They need somebody who matters, who isn't Jerry Hughes, who barely matters at this point in his career. And can Rousseau be that guy? We'll see. Like the pick for sure. Ravens, really similar thing. This one sketches me out a little bit more. Just the whole 0 sacks as a college player in your final year, being a first-round draft pick is wild to me. And I get it in terms of his athleticism. And of course, Penn State only played, 6 games as opposed to, 10, 12 other teams. Sure, I do get that. That sketches me out a little bit. But Ravens, I can guarantee they're going to get some use out of him, a guy that athletic, the way they played defense for sure. Now, does that mean they maybe could have made a better pick, and somebody who's going to do that anyway, plus add some? To be seen. But, yeah, they do need edge rushers. Maybe he ends up being good. I'm sure they're going to use him good. And the last pick of the first round, not a ton of super interesting picks in the 20s and 30s here. But this one I like too. Of all the places, I talked about this with the Buccaneers, edge depth is not going to hurt them for sure. Obviously, it doesn't hurt any team. But they were kind of only running 3 deep there. And JPP are probably getting a little bit older. You're throwing somebody in there too. I don't know if he's going to play a lot this year, but I don't mind that at all. And yeah, so as far as this first round goes, a lot of picks I like, especially in that 10 to 25 range. I think a lot of those teams, 10 to 23 range, a lot of those teams have a lot of really good things. Those players can be good. I don't necessarily, but it's the right idea. Worst pick in the first round, very clearly the Travis Etienne thing. What in the hell was that? Best pick, I think obviously Trevor Lawrence at 1 if he's what everybody says he is. But other than that, I think Devontae Smith, if he was up to it there, Christian Darrisaw for the Vikings was outstanding, I really think. And yeah, overall, obviously very interesting first round. I'll be back, all the next couple of days and past that talking about the rest of these draft picks. But yeah, interesting to say the very least for sure.